ready, guys?
One of the most common mistakes in the opening is moving the same piece twice. It is the first bad habit of countless new players learning chess. Typically, you move out a piece and you immediately move it a second time to attack the opponent. With very limited exceptions for the most beginning chess games, chess pieces do not win games by themselves. Even experienced players regularly make these mistakes though, repeatedly moving pieces to make threats while neglecting other needs. The most common punishment occurs when your opponent is able to react to your threats while continuing their development, getting their king castled, and generally seeing to the needs of their position. Today's game, Delgado vs. Borges from 2006, number 4 in our series on modern masterpieces, is a vicious and short example of the risks of moving the same piece multiple times in the opening. Delgado opens the game here with pawn to c4. We get e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6, g3, bishop to b4. And in this position, there are two theoretical moves. The one that I would go for is bishop g2, which is a very reasonable move. Obviously, it makes a lot of sense, and white is getting ready to castle. Now, the move that is actually a little better according to the engine and does seem to score better in practice is the move knight to d5, which Delgado does play. Now, this is a perfectly valid move, but it does break the principle we're looking at today. Don't move a piece twice in the opening. The knight goes from c3 to d5. It threatens to capture the bishop on b4, picking up the bishop pair, which, as we know, can be quite appealing in the opening. And it is a good move. It's an entirely valid, sound move. But when you break principles, you have to follow up very, very precisely in an irrational position, which is hard to do. I don't recommend it for beginning players, and it's going to be a struggle for Delgado here. After knight d5, we see the move pawn to e4. And having moved a piece already twice in the opening, he needs to move a piece a second time twice in the opening, this knight that is under attack. The theoretically best move, according to the engine, is the move knight to h4, another move that breaks a principle and puts a knight on the edge of the board where it's typically less effective. Still, the computer says that you can play this way, and of course, black also has some issues in the position, like the bishop on b4 is on a square where it doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's a very complex an interesting game where both players have to find irrational and very interesting moves and ideas. Instead, though, in the game, Delgado plays the move knight takes b4, and this is already a significant mistake. It makes a lot of sense to capture the bishop pair, but this is coming at the cost of a lot of development. The knight has moved for a third time. Black recaptures here. This knight on f3 needs to move again. Black is already up in terms of time. Black has developed 2 knights. White has developed 1. Black is ready to castle on the next move. White still needs 2 moves to castle. Black already has an advantage in this game, and there are real risks for white in that he may be blown off the board. So the knight moves into d4 into the center of the board, castles, and now bishop g2. In this position, we see the move rook e8, which is a very nice move. Also possible right away was the move pawn to d5. It makes so much sense. You have a lead in development. You want to break in the center. The move pawn to a3, which white might want to play to try to kick the knight out and then capture on d5, doesn't actually work because this knight is loose on d4. So after pawn to a3, d takes c4, the queen is hitting the knight, and white is in a world of trouble. d5 is very strong, very forcing, but I also really respect the decision from Borges to say, hey, d5 is coming, let me get my rook into action. That's going to pay off, and it definitely does in this game. So in this position, what would you play as white? White's position is already unenviable, but if you follow principles and just go ahead and castle, you're not losing yet. Pawn to d5 is very strong for black. Black has an advantage already before move 10, which shouldn't happen. Black does move second in the game. Black shouldn't have an advantage this early. But if you castle, you can live to fight another day. Another idea that you might consider is knight c2. This does move a piece yet again in the opening, but it also offers a trade of this knight here on b4, which has some dangerous ideas that we're going to see. And because there's an idea to trade the knight on b4, even though you're losing time by retreating the knight to c2, you're going to get some of that time back as black decides what to do, either to trade on c2 or possibly to defend the knight. So here, after rook e8, though, we see another against principle mistake from white, queen to b3, moving the queen early in the opening. This isn't something we've yet discussed in this particular series, but many of you will know that you don't want to move your queen early in the opening because she can become a target. Because she is so valuable, she has to retreat from every little bishop, knight, rook, or pawn that attacks her. That will also be a problem in this game. So after queen b3, we get the move pawn c5, attacking the knight on d4 and defending the knight on b4. Could you ask for anything more? In this position, white is already in a lot of trouble, but if white wants to survive, the only decision at this point is knight c2. The idea that we already saw would have been better earlier, but trying to trade off the knight for the knight on b4. After knight takes c2, queen takes c2, d5, black's position is cooking. Black has major space, a lead in development, a big advantage, but still, white can castle in this position and live to fight on, try to defend and hold, and hope that black makes some mistakes later in the game. Instead, though, we get the move knight to b5, jumping out into black's side of the board. This knight really has no business being here. White, I think, is hoping to retreat the knight and kind of fight for the control of d5 at some point. There's never going to be time for this, and knight b5 is already the losing move from Delgado. After knight b5, you can immediately play an idea that we're going to see in a moment, but before looking at a knight sacrifice that we'll see next move, we see here the move pawn d5, which is so natural in this position and is also very good. So after pawn to d5, breaking in the center, freeing the bishop, which will also then allow this rook to get involved if needed, we get pawn to a3, taking more time out and trying to get this knight to retreat. When you have a position like this, where your rook is on this amazing line, the queen has tons of scope, you got your knight out, your bishop out, these pawns in the center, and your opponent's king is not yet castled, the last thing you should be thinking about doing is retreating. I mentioned that on the last move, instead of playing d5, black could already have played a knight sacrifice, and now it's even better with the inclusion of d5 and a3, and Borges does play knight d3 check. Again, if your instinct when a3 is played is to retreat the knight to c6, learn to fight that instinct. Do not retreat when you have so much going in your favor. Look to go forward even if you have to sacrifice. Here, this move is tremendous because it's opening up the e-file after pawn takes and pawn takes. And if white doesn't want to open the e-file, the only choice is to move the king over, which is such a sad decision. And then knight g4. Basically, the attack on f2 is going to force white to capture on d3 anyway, but it's just a worse position because, you know, now white's lost more time. The king is on f1 and queen f6. The threats on f2 are massive. Black is already gaining some material back, and these pieces are contributing nothing to white's defense. This is a completely winning attack for the black pieces. In fact, the computer even says mate in 7. I have no idea what the mate in 7 is, but it's impossible to find viable moves for white here. So after knight d3 check, well, you might as well die with a full stomach. So you're going to take this knight and then hope that black makes some mistake in the ensuing position. Pawn takes d3 check. The rook is open. This pawn on d3 is a monster that creates all kinds of amazing mating ideas. In this position, we should first look at what if the king goes to f1, not played in the game, but we'll take a look here. And if you want to pause your video, it's a great moment to practice your puzzle rush skills. Boom. Rook to e1 check. Such a pretty move. You can win more prosaically, but in addition to always wanting to win beautifully, you should be looking for the forcing moves. And this forcing move allows the queen to come to e7 with a gain of tempo, king over, queen e2 check, king g1. Good moment to pause your video and find the clean finish. The clean finish is knight g4. There's no defense of f2. And in fact, white doesn't even have a spite check. It's just queen takes f2 checkmate on the next move. So backing up, had the king gone to f1, rook e1 check wins right away. So king d1. Now, the best continuation here and the prettiest continuation here is knight to g4. Black is spoiled for choice, but this choice was extra nice. If knight g4, not played in the game, the natural defense for white is to try rook f1, the only move to try to defend the f2 pawn. And this is a great moment to pause your video and try to find a checkmate in 4 for black. Well, black has lots and lots of great moves here, many ways to win, but the checkmate in 4, the most beautiful, most decisive continuation is rook to e1 check. Absolutely gorgeous. If rook takes e1, knight takes f2 with smothered checkmate. I'm going to put that on the board. It's so pretty. Knight takes f2, smothered checkmate with the d3 pawn doing such great work. And of course, after rook e1, if the king here takes on e1, then you just put the queen on the e file. It can be e8, e7. It makes no difference. The queen is coming into e2 with checkmate. You can only throw your bishop in the way, and then it will be checkmate on the next turn. So after king d1, knight g4 was just absolutely crushing, but black plays pawn takes e4, which is also very good. A key point to this game is there are many ideas. Black doesn't even find the best moves, but black's advantage is so strong after his opponent takes such liberties by moving the same piece multiple times, by moving the queen early in the game, by never getting castled, that black doesn't have to be precise. When your opponent is neglecting principles and you are playing according to principle, you are going to have many, many good options. So after pawn takes c4, queen takes c4, bishop g4 check, knight g4, and bishop e6 were also fantastic moves. We see pawn to f3. Now, simplest and cleanest, and it's the second time this game, black could have gone for a winning idea right away, is to retreat the bishop to e6. And there's an idea that we're going to see at the end of the game where after the queen moves, black might have a queen sacrifice to force checkmate. That's very decisive. I'll let you look if you want to search for that checkmate, but bishop e6 was really clean. We're going to see the main idea in the game at the very finish, and I won't spoil the beautiful idea. Instead, knight to e4. Not the strongest, but still strong enough. Very, very pretty. Of course, the knight simply wants to go into f2 with checkmate. So you've got no time to capture the bishop on g4, and you can't capture the knight on e4 because the bishop is pinning the f3 pawn to the queen. So very, very pretty. After knight e4, rook f1, only defense, try to hold on to this pawn or this square on f2 to prevent checkmate with knight f2. Bishop to e6, and now in this position, queen to a4. If queen takes e4, bishop b3 check, and then the queen is falling here. Black has a winning attack in addition to having extra material. So bishop e6, queen to a4, trying to hold things together. And in this position, we see a brilliant move, knight to f2 check. This forces the rook to capture. Rook takes f2. Or you could move the king to the e-file. I guess I'll show that really quickly. But if the king goes to the e-file, then simply bishop b3 check is a move that is discovered check and wins the queen, so that wins the game. So rook takes f2 is the only try that really makes sense. And in this position, I would definitely encourage you to pause your video and try to find the winning move that's played in the game. So having sacrificed the knight, there is nothing in the rook's path other than the bishop on e6, controlling that e-file. So the rook kind of has latent control over the e-file. And that means that if the bishop could go to b3, it would be checkmate, if not for the queen right here defending that checkmate. That's a very, very shaky defense. And that means that the move queen a5, as played in the game, is completely winning. If the queen is captured, then it's simply bishop b3 with a beautiful, beautiful checkmate. And unfortunately, if you don't capture black's queen, then there's simply nowhere for this queen to go, no good way to defend it. The queen is falling, and when the queen falls, that means it's checkmate on b3 right here. The only ways to continue the game are ideas that just give up tons of material, like queen e4, when bishop to b3 check will win the queen on e4, and again, black's attack continues. So after this lovely, lovely move, queen to a5, the idea we could have seen earlier after bishop e6 right away, then Delgado resigned in this position, thoroughly punished for having neglected principles, for having moved the same piece multiple times in the opening.